This is part of the landscape, and it's become worse over the last 6 months. And so I want to talk about it. Shame is actually neurobiologically in lower school experienced as trauma, because when you are not lovable and you're dependent on safety and nurturing and food and shelter, and you're not lovable, then that's a threat to your survival, right? So if teachers, and let me tell you in the ranking, let me tell you exactly how it goes. Parents, teachers, clergy, peers. Because one of the things that exacerbates shaming is a power differential. So that's why we can inflict the most damage and we can heal the most wounds. So I want to make sure we all know what we're talking about. So we're going to go through these. Let me put them all up. We're going to go through these 4 because they're radically different concepts. We use these words interchangeably, and they are completely different. And one of the 4 elements of shame resilience that the most resilient men and women have in common is they know the difference between these words, and they use the right word to express the right emotion. So shame is a focus on self. Shame is I am bad. There's something inherently wrong with me. The one we confuse it with the most is guilt. Guilt is I did something bad. Shame is a focus on self. Guilt is a focus on behavior. I hand out papers and John gets his paper back and says, "Oh my God, I'm so stupid. I'm such an idiot. I'm so stupid. I'm so stupid for not studying." Shame or guilt? Shame. The focus is on him. So what about if John gets the paper back and he reads it and he says, "God, not studying was such a stupid thing to do." Guilt. One's a focus on self. One's a focus on behavior. You look at a kid and you say, "You are a great kid. That was a stupid choice." Guilt or shame? Guilt or shame? Guilt. So let me ask you, let me give you a visceral understanding of why this is different. How many of you in here, if you hurt my feelings, how many of you could apologize and say to me, "I'm sorry, I made a mistake"? How many of you could do that? I could do that with y'all. Shame, "I'm sorry, I am a mistake." That's the difference between shame and guilt. Is it semantics? No, it's not semantics. Let me tell you why. Shame is highly correlated with addiction, depression, bullying, violence, eating disorders, and suicide. And here's the big piece you need to understand. Guilt is inversely correlated with those outcomes, meaning the higher the level of guilt-shame talk, the less likely it is for a child to experience those outcomes. As it turns out, many researchers argue that guilt is actually a protective factor against things like addiction. Odd. That's shocking, right? And it's not just semantics. How many of you have ever experienced shame just the way someone looks at you? So you can't feel shame towards someone, but use the right vocabulary and pull that off. But it's a focus on behavior. First longitudinal study they did with kids, they took a cohort of kids in 5th grade, measured whether they were shame-prone or guilt-prone, meaning do they use shame self-talk or guilt self-talk. Followed them up as seniors in high school. Shame-prone kids more likely to drop out, attempt suicide, and engage in high-risk drug and alcohol behaviors. Guilt-prone kids more likely to finish high school, apply for college, complete community service projects and hours, and engage in lower-risk sex and alcohol behaviors and drugs. It is a huge difference between shame and guilt. Does it make sense to y'all so far? So this happened in a classroom that I was visiting. A teacher hands back papers. Everyone has a paper, right? Who didn't get a paper back? Who didn't get a paper back? Sally, you didn't get a paper back. How many of you are surprised that Sally did not get her paper back? Wait, keeps going. Sally, how many times have I asked you to put your name on your paper? Let me write it for you, STUPID. I'm observing in the classroom as a shame researcher. But wait, so let me tell you Sally's experience here. Sally's experience is this. If Sally's self-talk is that is the meanest, nastiest, most rotten teacher ever. Awesome. Okay, because that is humiliation. Let me tell you the difference between shame and humiliation. Shame is I deserve what just happened. Humiliation is I did not deserve what happened. The only thing that really separates shame and humiliation is the variable of deserving. So Sally is saying, "Oh my God, you're the most hideous thing ever, and I did not deserve that." Awesome. If Sally's self-talk is, I'm so stupid, why did I do that?" Here's the danger, and here's why humiliation is better than shame. Because as a primary caregiver, as another teacher, as someone Sally trusts, she will not tell me if she experiences that as shame because there's no news. What is she going to convey? I got called stupid, I'm stupid. But if she experiences it as humiliation, she's a little pissed off. I'll never forget. Oh my God. My daughter was a kindergartner, and her teacher called me and she said, I always was kind of confused about what you did. Now I'm clear. And I was like, oh God, why? And she said, because Ellen was in the glitter center this morning. And I said, woo, Ellen, you're messy. And she sat straight up and she said, I may be making a mess, but I am not mad. Audience laughing. I was like, oh my God, I've been marked by the whole, would that spread like wildfire across teachers, yes or no? Yeah, they're like, Breen Brown, she's crazy. Make sure you add a lot of stuff in there when you're like, yeah, but that's what we told our kids. Like, look, if you burn down the school, there are going to be some consequences. But no matter what happens, no name calling at all. Not at school, not in this house, not with each other. Steve and I try not. You know, we don't model that. And between siblings, let me tell you, the biggest heartbreak I've ever seen, probably in my research life, is interviewing siblings. Adult siblings who have a very disrupted relationship, who are cruel to each other, because you know how siblings work. I can shame you because I know all this stuff that hurts you. I know about the acne and the struggle with the weight, and I know everything. Parents who do not intervene around that and say, that will not happen in this house. You will not talk to each other that way. If Charlie, my son's doing his homework and he's like, God, I'm so dumb. No, no name calling. I didn't call Ellen a name. You called yourself a name. No name calling. How else does shame show up in classrooms and in schools and in organizations? I mean, I do most of my work in like Fortune 100 companies. How does it show up there? Same way in classrooms, favoritism, gossip, name calling. And these are adults. But that's how it shows up. The last of what we call the four conscious effects is embarrassment. Fleeting, often funny after it happens, but the hallmark of embarrassment is when we do something embarrassing, we know that we're not the only ones who have done it. Does that make sense? When you're in shame, let me tell you how shame works. Shame cannot survive being spoken. If something shaming happens to me and I can call my sister or I can tell my husband, oh my God, this was exactly what it sounds like. I'm going to shame shitstorm right now. Let me tell you what just happened. It can't hold on. Shame cannot survive being spoken because shame requires you to believe you're alone in order for it to maintain its power. Does that make sense? It's about speaking truth to shame. It's about saying, this is what happened. I feel completely alone. And like this makes me a bad person. There are three ways we defend ourselves from shame, and I want you to think about yourself. But I also want you to think about your students, because this is something I draw on the board the first day of school. I draw these shields and I say, here are the shame shields. You feel shame, feel not enough. This is where we have to become the learners. Let me look at my time. It says 0. What if I just assumed that meant I'm just starting? Audience cheering, I just love, you know why, I'm going to tell you, and I'll say this. I know this is going to be recorded and I'll get emails about it, but it's worth it. People ask me all the time, like, what's your goal in your life? I was like, to make the world a braver place. If you had one opportunity, what would be the most effective impact you could ever do? I said, if I could get in front of every teacher in the world and we could have real conversations about shame, about vulnerability, about courage, because I think the revolution will not be televised. It will be in your classrooms. That is where this will happen. 100%. You are working on the hardest edges of love. And my invitation to you is there's a lot of hate out there right now. Yes or no? Audience, yes. My invitation to myself as well, because I'm not good at this right now, is every time you hear something hateful or someone's talking about hate, try to switch out the word for pain. Try to think about pain. This is only going to change with you. I wouldn't pull parents in to do this. I would pull teachers because this is where we can do it. And I'll just stop now and say thank you for inviting me. And thank you from the bottom of my heart for waking up every day and making the choice to be brave. Your lives. It makes a bigger difference than you will ever know. So thank y'all. Audience applauding.